this on the replay, here's where the talking to myself starts. I always start off with that. Just because people don't come on the live immediately. I just closed the drawer beneath me. People don't come on the live immediately, so, you know. I could sit here awkwardly, but when people come in, they just see me sitting awkwardly, so it doesn't always work that way. But today's challenge is imagining a new you, day 4 of 7, which is exciting. Welcome, Emma. Blessed. I like the name, by the way. I am blessed as well. I believe that. I'm absolutely blessed. Welcome, Peg Latin. So I'm doing a 7-day manifestation challenge, just talking about changing your mindset to create some sort of new reality in your life. And today is day 4, imagining a new you. Now, I just want to start by saying there's nothing wrong with the old you. I'm not saying that at all. And maybe the you that is showing up right now is, you know, maybe your life is going where you want it to go, and that's great. But I think what ends up happening is a lot of us are stuck in a lot of different things, right? We're stuck and we don't seem to know how to get out of it. And of course, I've been there. In some areas, I'm still stuck, if I'm being honest. I mean, I don't have everything fully figured out. But if we're stuck in a certain thing or in a lot of different ways, part of it is because of the way that we're showing up on a regular basis. You know, when I work with clients as a hypnotist, I can kind of see, and you probably see this in your friends. You may not see it in yourself. But you can probably see it in your friends too, you know. You can kind of see the areas where the way they show up doesn't align with their goals, right? Like, you know, we all know it. We all know people, for example, who, you know, they want a great relationship, but you see how they show up on social media. They're always dramatic, or they're always getting back with their ex, or, you know, whatever. And again, I know that's an addiction at times. I even have written a book on that I'm going to be releasing soon. It's an addiction. I get it, you know. In fact, a lot of these bad habits are addictions in somewhere. But you can kind of see the connection. You can see, okay, this person is showing up as dramatic. They show up and spend, you know, hours a day texting someone toxic. You can kind of see why they don't, why they don't end up getting what they want. Yeah, exactly. Trauma bonded, defiant one. Now, is that the inability to visualize? Is that what that is? Tanya Lane, I don't want to sound ignorant, and I'll just ask that. Is that the inability to visualize? Okay, that's what I thought. So that's an interesting question. I'm not sure if hypnosis could help that. It might. My girlfriend actually has aphantasia, which is interesting, or aphantasia, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. And welcome, Kelsey. Good to see you. There are moments she talks like she can visualize. It's fascinating. But I'm not sure. I need to look into that, actually. I need to look into that, because I know a percentage of the population does have that. And you're right, Defiant One, about the... I don't want to get into debates, Zachary. This is not about debate here. So this is not a religious thing, by the way. Not religious at all, just so you know. But yes, I mean, in terms of... you know, we do what we do, and there are good reasons why we do what we do. You know, you could be trauma bonded, right? Addictions, habits, routines, we all get in those. You know, we do. But usually we keep showing up in that same way, and then we kind of get the life most of the time. There are times we can be genuinely like, there are cases of injustice and things like that, obviously, but in a lot of cases, you know, especially if you live in a country, you know, like America, where there's a lot of opportunity and, you know, there's a lot of wealth and things like that. The way we show up, it does kind of predict kind of where things go largely. You know, like I said, someone who shows up by texting their toxic ex, by being dramatic, they're probably going to put off people who are good for them, right? The same is true with money, right? You know, someone who, for example, overshops or overspends, doesn't want to learn about money, has no interest in money, but yet says, I really want more money. Well, they're probably not going to get more money, right? Because the people that, you know, for better or for worse, I'm not saying the people that get their money, you know, always deserve it. Maybe they're not good people, but the people that get money typically like money. They know about money. They care about money. You know, they're the ones who are researching financial markets, business. You know, they're doing that. They're doing that work. And that may not be the work that everyone wants to do, but you can kind of see why they end up with money, because they care about that, right? So someone that just says, I want to be rich, but has no interest in money, no interest in learning about it, no interest in starting a business, no interest in improving themselves, is probably not going to get that wealth. And now playing the lottery is not exactly a wealth building idea, not consistently. You know what I mean? Welcome, Hanji. Hypnotist just means someone who uses hypnosis. is what that is. So I do hypnosis. That's one of the things I do as part of my work with clients. And that's right, Tanya. You have to match the frequency of what you want to receive. Absolutely. And now, so a lot of people, when they think about manifestation, this is kind of where I differ. They say, show up the way you will after you get that thing you've achieved. That's kind of the common advice. So, imagine yourself sitting on a beach, enjoying like cocktails or something if you want to get rich, right? Imagine yourself having already gotten rich. But see, I think it's the opposite. I think you got to focus on how you show up now. Like, you've got to become the person that attracts the thing that you want, and you have to do it now. So in terms of getting a relationship, it's not about sitting there imagining you're sitting there watching a movie with your partner when you meet a great partner. It's about showing up now in a way that's going to bring that partner in your life, right? It's about becoming the person that is going to get that partner, becoming the person that's going to get a healthy partner, or becoming the person that gets the money that allows you to be on the beach, right? That's kind of how I view it. So, I mean, obviously, like, imagining you sitting on the beach is great, but if you're turning yourself into someone who can sit on a beach and enjoy drinks, that's what you're turning into. You're turning into someone who can sit on sand and drink alcohol. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I love sitting on sand, right? and having a drink while sitting on sand would be great, right? But that's not what's going to lead you to that scenario, right? You're not going to. You've got to become the person that shows up a different way. No one who got rich did it because they became someone that sits on a beach, right? They became that way because they gave something to the world that people wanted to buy. That's how they got the money that they wanted, right? Same with relationships. The people that get in great relationships are people that send out that same energy. So if you want someone that's attractive and kind and generous and charismatic, the best way to get that is to be that way yourself in some way, or even become the person that would invite someone like that into your life, right? So you can't show up on a daily basis as someone who's angry and unkind and, you have your head down every time when you're walking, because you may even have someone that's healthy come into your life, but you're not going to ever attract someone like that if that's who you are. And for me, that's what manifestation is. It's about showing up in a different way in the present. In every present moment is how I view manifestation. And that's right, Tanya, as well. Not being in a state of lack. That is absolutely true. And I think for those that don't understand what that means, when you are in a kind of survival mode, when you're in a state where you don't really believe you deserve things like that, or you're just trying to get by, you're not really going to thrive if that's the state you're in. And so by imagining a new you, and it's funny, I want to just kind of backtrack just a little bit. Almost every time, I'm saying almost literally every time when I work with hypnosis clients, in the first session, one of the things I do is I have them kind of imagine a better future for themselves. Like, step into the idea that they deserve a better future, like what that looks like. Like, let's say someone's I work with some people who have been in unhealthy relationships. So I'll ask them, imagine what it's like when you leave that partner and you're just enjoying life. You can wake up and not have to worry about the toxicity, not have to worry about paying their bills or working 2 jobs because they won't work, or you don't have to worry about them, texting you something to put you down. Like, what's life going to be like when you get to that point? What's interesting is that some people literally cannot imagine that. It's a real challenge for them to imagine what that future looks like. A future where they are happy, where they are free, where they can wake up feeling great. And I just find that fascinating, because I worked with a client one time who I asked him, I said, tell me what it's going to be like when you have solved your problem. And he kept saying, well, the problem is this. I said, no. Tell me what it's like when you have solved the problem. And it was something like, well, I'll probably be happy, but let me tell you more about the problem. It's just fascinating, because when you've been stuck so long, your brain is so used to being stuck that even imagining something different can be challenging. Like, it literally can be hard to imagine something different. Now, that's the problem, though. If you cannot imagine something different, if your brain can't even begin to process something different, then you're never going to achieve something different. You're not. If your brain cannot imagine waking up without your toxic partner and living your day without them, then you will never take those steps to do that. Because that's how your brain moves into the future. That's how your brain changes, is by imagining something different and then taking action based on that future imagination. So if you can't even really, I mean, obviously someone could intellectually probably say, yeah, if I leave this person, this will happen. But by imagine, I mean something a little deeper, like truly understanding what it would feel like, how great it would feel, and what it would be like to wake up in the morning and not have to wake up to your toxic partner screaming or something like that. It can be hard for people. And the reason that is, if you understand how the brain works, is that we have different structures in our brain. And when your brain's in survival mode, the survival parts of your brain are extremely active. So your brain is like flaring up into stress response constantly. Now, when your brain's in a stress response, those structures are very active. But what that also means is that your brain doesn't have an unlimited source of resources and energy, right? So your brain can't just give energy to every part of your brain at every time. So it's going to take energy and take resources away from the frontal lobe part of your brain. Now that's the part of your brain where you imagine things, you visualize, you're creative and things like that. So your brain is actually draining resources from the part that's responsible for imagining. And, an extreme example, it would be like when you're in a really strong stressful state, like if you're being chased by like a tiger, you're probably not going to pause and start doing algebra formulas. You're not going to think about painting a picture when you're on the run from a tiger, right? Now that's an extreme example, but a lot of us have gotten so used to surviving that the frontal lobe part of our brain is not even active. Now, I missed some of your comments there, Tanya. I do want to address those, and that's awesome. Obviously, as a hypnotist, I do believe there are subliminal messages. That can be a thing, and affirmations as well. In fact, I wrote a book on affirmations. Let me pull that book out. I just saw it, so do a little self-promotion here. Nothing wrong with that. I'll be right back here. Too bad my cat's not on screen. He's a good fill-in for me there. Actually, my book, I have multiple bookshelves, so I think I saw it over here. So yeah, it's called Say It Like You Mean It. I don't know if you can see this very clearly, but Say It Like You Mean It, How to Use Affirmations and Declarations to Create the Life You Want. So I absolutely do believe in the power of affirmations. In fact, I think affirmations can help you create a new you. And that's let me just get back on topic. I think I've gotten off topic a little bit. So the first step really in imagining a new you is to just feel what it would feel like to be someone who does the things that you really wish you could do, right? That's the beginning to imagining a new you. Like imagine what it would be like to wake up and to have solved the problem that you want to solve, or to be in the process of solving that problem. Like what would it feel like to wake up in 6 months and you're the type of person that is whatever it is you want to do. You're getting up, you're doing the things you want to do, you've written your book, you're creating content on social media, you're applying for that new job. Like, what would that feel like? What would it feel like to be the person that does the things that you want to do? Now, a lot of people will say, there's a couple objections people have to this that I've noticed. The first thing is, they don't believe it's possible. They're like, there's no way. You just can't. You can't become someone new. You are who you are, and you can't change that. Now, there is evidence that, yes, a lot of personality traits are hereditary. Your brain, once you're an adult, has wired pretty significantly. It's true. And the default is going to be the old you. And I always say that if you've done something 100 times, you're probably going to do it that same way the 101st time. Let's take the parent that always yells at their kids. When your kid does something bad, you yell at them. If you've done it 100 times, probably your brain's going to automatically want you to yell the 101st time, right? Same is true if you've snacked on a bag of Skittles before bed and you don't want to do it, right? And you've done it 100 times, you're probably going to do it 101 times because it's become an automatic habit and you're probably not going to challenge that. But once you start to realize that's just an automatic habit, it's just an unconscious thing, it's just a signal your brain's sending you because you've done it 1,000 times before. Once you realize that, though, you're free to then say, maybe I don't have to do this. Maybe I can do something else, right? Because they actually did a study. It's very fascinating. They did brain scan research on method actors. And so method actors are actors that really get into their role. So they don't just, just pretend. They actually really try to become that person in some way. So they try to think like that person. They try to feel like that person. And sometimes, you probably even know this, some actors even like take jobs related to the role they're going to play to do the actions of that person. Well, what they found is that method actors, they did brain scans, they found that their brain was actually changing based on their method acting. And the parts of their brain that were changing were in the areas where the self is located in your brain. Now, I find that fascinating for two reasons. The first thing is that who you are now is a function of what you thought, believed, and done, right? Thought, felt, and done, sorry. So the you that you think is you is mainly you in part because you've been that you for so long, right? But it also means that if you become a new you, which by that I mean change some of your thoughts, change some of your feelings, and change some of your actions, you can then become a new you. Like literally you can become a new you. Now think about it. If, for example, let's just say I just said I am a movie producer. I said, I'm doing a movie. I'm making a movie. It's just an everyday life movie. And I'm going to pay you $1,000 a day to just act as if you are, let's say, the best version of yourself. That's the movie. It's going to be about you, the best version of you. $1,000 a day. All you got to do is show up like a different person. So let's say that person would be someone who's confident, happy, talks to people, whatever it is. I'm paying you $1,000 a day. All you got to do is just pretend. You got to pretend for a month. That's all you got to do. Show up and act. By what you would find by the end of that 30 days, you would find a couple things. The first thing is that your life would change dramatically. If you literally showed up in a different way, even if you were acting and pretending, if you showed up differently every single day, your life would change. Because people who knew you wouldn't know you were acting necessarily. Because if you're being really realistic, they would truly think you're that person. And by the end of the day, end of the 30 days, you might not know the difference between you and the acting, right? Because if you think like that person, if you feel like that person, and you act like that person, then the question is, are you that person? And I would argue you are, because that's how you determine who you are, right? So you can absolutely become a new you. Now, the problem is, because I don't want to make this imply that, oh, you just wake up and it's going to happen easily, but the problem is the old you is really firmly wired in your brain when you think about it, right? The old you is like deeply wired in there. So the way our brain wires is through repetition. So the more often different neurons in the brain fire together, the wires between them, the connections become stronger. So which means if like the neuron for my kid misbehaves and the neuron for I'm going to yell and scream fire together all the time, then what that means is that connection has become very strong in your brain. So you're going to default to it, right? You're going to keep defaulting to it. But because your brain is powerful, we're actually able, I don't think other animals are able to do this really. We can. Now we're able to, but as a human, you're able to use your advanced part of your brain and say, wait a minute, I don't want to do that anymore. I know I've yelled and screamed at my kids every time they misbehave. I've done that 1,000 times, but I don't want to do it the 1,001st time. I want to try something different. Now, what's going to happen is your brain is going to resist that. It's going to say, oh, no. Your kid really did something bad this time. Your kid spilled something, and he spilled it on a book of yours that you really like. So you have to yell this time, even though the kid probably didn't do it. The kid probably didn't do it on purpose, right? But your brain's going to tell you got to be mad. Or like when you go to, like for example, when you go to eat better, your brain's going to tell you, oh yeah, you went off that one time, but so might as well go off for the rest of the month. Who cares, right? So your brain's going to try to sabotage your efforts at change because it's so used to the old things. Well, Debbie, I'm not sure the exact brain structures that relate to short-term memory. I used to know that. I think the hippocampus is involved in the formation of memories, I believe. And I'm pretty sure that's one of the structures that can be also messed up through trauma. I'm a little, well, I'm not that rusty on my brain structures, but I'm rusty on that brain structure. I don't want to say I'm too rusty because in the book I'm in the middle of writing about breaking your addiction to someone toxic, they do a lot of research on some of the brain structures that are involved in that process and also involved in like the trauma bond. But I'm pretty sure the hippocampus is involved in that. But don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. But it might. I think it's one of those structures. I know it's involved in learning and memory consolidation. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so trauma. So one of the things that does keep us kind of stuck in the old you, and I do want to talk about this because trauma is a huge part of it. So the thing about trauma is actually your brain's way of protecting you when you think about it. It really is. But the trauma response, I'm sorry, not trauma. The trauma response, right? Well, drama keeps a lot of people stuck in the old you as well. I'll tell you that too. I mean, drama is actually addicting, believe it or not. Oh, you probably do believe it. People love drama. Obviously, I even think some people, they date dramatic partners because a dramatic partner is way more interesting and exciting than a non-dramatic partner. Now, that's another discussion here, but I absolutely believe you can be addicted to drama just because it's exciting, it's fun. I've seen people in relationships with dramatic people. I've seen them spend hours of their day like investigating their partner, and they just love it. You can just tell, like, they love it. They love, at some level, not conscious, some unconscious level, they thrive on the drama. As a hypnotist, if I were working with someone like that, that'd be an absolute unconscious thing going on. No one ever comes out and says, well, maybe a few very honest people. They don't come out and say, I love drama, I'm addicted to it, I have to have it all day, right? But if people were being honest, absolutely. But the way trauma works, so the trauma response is actually your brain trying to protect you. It really is. And it does that in a very inefficient, primitive way. It does that through fight, flight, or freeze, essentially, right? Hey, welcome, Tara. Good to see you. It's always good to see you. I went to high school with Tara, and she's also a Browns fan, so that's good. So the thing about trauma response is it's protecting you, right? But in a very primitive way. Fight, flight, or freeze, right? And the parts of our brain where that happens, they're not very logical. So they don't really know time very well. So the way the trauma response works is your brain quickly learns if you felt unsafe, particularly unsafe in a moment, like let's say, your parents screamed at you all the time as a child. Well, your primitive brain learns that to respond to that, you either fight, flee, or freeze in some way. So maybe you learn to be a people pleaser, which is a type of freezing. Maybe you learn to cope. Maybe that's when you started using substances. That's a type of flight mechanism, right? Or maybe you yelled and screamed back. That's a fight response. Now, the thing about trauma is that it gets embedded at this unconscious level in what would be considered the limbic system if you're dividing the brain up into different structures. And these structures aren't logical, so your brain kind of learns that if it protected you once, it'll protect you again and again and again, and that's kind of what happens. So, well, that's a good question, Eric, because I think we have different ways of dealing with things, right? And also what can happen, too, is there's also a genetic component to personality as well. So some people, respond to things differently. They respond to stimuli differently. But some of it also has to do with the people's perspective on trauma. So there's actually research about things that lead to traumatic growth versus traumatic stress, which is fascinating. In fact, the book is not out yet, but I have a book coming out on breaking your addiction to someone toxic. And they did actually a study on hope, actually. So just hoping, like having the characteristic of hope. And what they found is I think they did it with parents who had children who had cancer, like terminal cancer, which is obviously very traumatizing. And they found that the ones that had hope experienced significantly more post-traumatic growth than those that did not. So to some degree, it is your perspective on the trauma. And it's also why, too, that a lot of people who've been traumatized actually become very successful people in life. Like some people take that trauma, like I looked at like the 100 most famous people of the last century, and they mentioned that like, and that was of course a list that someone came up with. You could argue, who the most famous people are, but I think like 50 to 60 of them, of that 100, had like horrible childhoods. So some people, they, when presented with trauma, they channel that into doing something. They channel it into learning something, discovering something, getting out of the house as soon as they can by studying hard. Different people just channel it into different things. And I think that could be why we have different responses to trauma. I'm sorry to hear about that, Debbie. I really am. That's sad. I have a daughter, and I just cannot imagine that. That is one of my worst fears, honestly. So just know that, you have all my support here, I promise. Because oh my goodness, that's something I would not want to face. But see, trauma, though, keeps us kind of stuck is what it does. It's, that fight, flight, or freeze keeps us stuck. It keeps us... So our brain has been trained to typically, when you're traumatized, you typically see your threat detection system is very overly sensitive is what happens. So you now see threats everywhere. And that's one of the things that also keeps you stuck. So you may have been, for example, traumatized by getting bitten by a dog. Well, now your brain's, protection system is now afraid of all dogs, for example. So you're not going to be able to enjoy the company of dogs because your brain, because it's going through that trauma response, is now generalizing that one experience out to all experiences. And that does keep us stuck. Now, again, it's your brain trying to protect you. It's your brain. Now, the logic of your old parts of your brain is dogs are bad. A dog bit you, and now I'm going to protect you in the future from all dogs. Now, that worked. And the thing is, it worked, you could say, in the past. It literally has stopped you from being bitten by dogs, but it doesn't work in your adult life, right? Now you can't enjoy any pets, let's say. Or now you can't even walk the streets because you're afraid you might run into a dog. So the trauma can work at one level and work in the past, but doesn't now. And that's why I mentioned this a couple of days ago and the other day of my challenge, but the one important element of changing your life is to get real with where you are. And that includes addressing trauma. It really does. It includes healing from that trauma. Because what ends up happening is the minute you go to do something different, you're obviously going to get stressed or that trauma response is going to come out. This is absolutely live. Gothic, welcome. So it does. It comes out. So addressing trauma is very, very important for... Well, it kind of is, Eric. I wouldn't say efficient. It's efficient from one standpoint. It's efficient in the sense that it works to prevent, at all costs, the previous traumatic event from happening again. But it's not efficient from you want to live the best life you can live standpoint. Oh, inefficient. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. But it is efficient in some ways. It actually is efficient in some ways. It's efficient from this scary thing will never happen again. But what it does is it's kind of like there's an old 1980s Twilight Zone episode. I don't know if you guys ever seen that show. The 60s one's really good. The 80s one's not too bad. I've seen it. And there's this guy that's like really scared of like nuclear war and everything else. And he builds this bomb shelter and a warhead goes off. He's like, I knew it. And he goes in that bomb shelter. But it turns out it was like a false alarm, right? And so people are coming to rescue him, but he doesn't trust him. So it's like a local warhead hit, and what ends up happening is he stays in that bunker, and come to find out, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but come to find out that it was just like a local little warhead that accidentally went off. There wasn't nuclear war. People were coming to rescue him, and he refused it. So now he was sealed into this bunker with all this concrete, and there's this beautiful outside world that he doesn't even know exists now because he was so focused on protecting himself. That's right, healing paths, right. Hypervigilance. So it does protect you in a sense, but it also causes you to miss out on the ability to thrive is kind of what ends up happening. That's a great Twilight Zone episode, by the way. It's not very highly rated, but I always found it very, very both fascinating and actually very uncomfortable because I would hate to have that happen to me. I remember thinking that. And welcome, Lisa. Good to see you. So in terms of imagining a new you, and like I said earlier, when I work with clients, even imagining a new version of them is almost always a challenge. I've been working with a smoking cessation client, and he's been doing great, by the way, which is good. But that part of the session was so difficult for him. Like, tell me what it's like when you've quit smoking and how good that's going to feel. He's like, oh. I'm like, what's going to change in your life when you've quit smoking? Now, I can think of a ton of things. I'm thinking, well, he's going to save a ton of money. He's got a serious health problem, which is going to get better once he stops smoking. His girlfriend hates that he smokes, so they're going to get along better. So I had all these three things in mind because I knew it, but he couldn't even think of it. He couldn't even think of any of those things, which is fascinating. It's fascinating to me, and that's why to imagine the new you can be so challenging at times because the old you is so real in your mind, like the current you is so real. And sometimes your internal reality is, like I mentioned, it's a series of habits, it's a series of addictions, it's a series of trauma responses. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Well, there's something wrong with them, obviously, from a living optimally standpoint, but there's nothing bad about those things. They're normal human things that happen, but these are things that limit our ability to do the things that we want to do, right? Yeah, sure, Lacey. So when you have been traumatized, your brain, well, at least parts of your brain, they want to protect you in the future, right? They want to protect you. And they do it in a very primitive way. So these are not structures that are logical. They're the same structures we share with animals. My cat's around here somewhere. He has these structures as well. And what they do is when we've been in a position of that's been unsafe or we've been threatened, our brain wants to protect us from that situation in the future. And it does that by going into a trauma response, fight, flight, or freeze. Now, when we are chronically exposed to something that's traumatic or something that's really significantly traumatic one time, one of the ways our brain's threat detection system adapts is to be hypervigilant. So our brain's logic, at least the older parts of our brain, the logic is better to have overkill and never experience that trauma again than to go under and possibly experience it again. So our brain is way more likely to generalize, which means to let's take, for example, the dog thing I mentioned earlier. Your brain's way more likely to say, I've been bitten by a dog, so now I'm going to never engage a dog again, than it is to say, I got bitten by a dog, but this is just one dog, and I know that not all dogs are like this. So our brain's way more likely, if it was severe, to overgeneralize as a method of protection. So this just means that, so hypervigilance just means that when your brain's threat detection system has become dysfunctional because of trauma, you see threats where there aren't any threats. So it's why someone who has been traumatized, someone may just give him a look. Like at the gym, when I'm at the gym, I am working out and I am spaced out most of the time. And I am staring into space a lot. I notice that. I just stare into space. It's possible someone could think I'm staring at them. I'm not. I'm literally staring at nothing. But I was thinking the other day, someone could think I'm staring at them. And if someone's internal reality has been traumatized, or they may think I'm staring at them because they're ugly. Maybe they think I'm staring at them because I'm checking them out. Maybe they think I'm staring at them that I'm about ready to stalk them later. But that's not what's going on. I'm just staring into space, right? That's just an example of how your threat detection system and your internal reality can kind of be giving you hypervigilant messages when there aren't any. And you can kind of see why this would protect you, right? It does protect you. Because sometimes those looks do mean something bad. Sometimes if someone is staring at you, they are going to rob you. And your brain is always going to err on the side of caution to protect you. But that's kind of what we're up against, right? But on the other hand, if you're afraid of everybody, and let's say you want to go to a networking event, and this is a great chance for you to promote your business, but because of your trauma response, you're too afraid of everybody, and you can't talk to anybody, that's where the response becomes dysfunctional, essentially. So let's get back to imagining a new you, because I do have to get off here fairly soon. I have other things I need to do today. But so to do that, you just have to imagine, like, what would life be like? Like, what if you could wake up being the you that you want to be? Now, again, you're great the way you are. I'm not saying that. This is not about, putting yourself down. This is just about the you that you know is inside you, right? You can call it the higher self, right? You can call it whatever. The you that's inside of you. There's a part of you that is in alignment with your goals, right? There's a part of you that is in alignment with that. So to imagine that, you got to first be able to imagine that. Like, what would it look like for you to be able to talk to people? To wake up and be able to use the tools that you have to handle your trauma, for example. Like to wake up and say, because that's what a lot of people struggle with, is actually using the tools that they know, right? And that's, even when I hypnotize clients, like I gave my Stop Smoking client some tools to use in the moment. Part of what I use during hypnosis is to make sure he is motivated to use the tools, because what will happen is, in that craving, his brain will tell him, wait a minute, no, that tool is worthless. That cigarette's great. Just use that cigarette, right? So imagine waking up and using all your tools. You may never be perfectly healed. None of us are perfectly healed, but imagine what it would be like to wake up and use your tools. Wake up and you start to get anxious and you start to do the breathing exercise that you went over with your therapist. Imagine what it would be like to do that. Or when someone, when your toxic ex texts you, imagine how great it would feel to not respond to them, to wait an hour to respond to them, to get back to your work, do the work you're enjoying and not have to respond immediately to your toxic ex. Like, how would that feel? And this is the type of imagining that will get your brain to start to turn the current you into that new you. To just imagine. Now, not fantasize, not daydream, but really just feel what it would feel like to be that new you. Just to give your brain that possibility, to allow your brain to see that possibility. It would feel amazing, wouldn't it, Lacey? Absolutely. Like, it would feel amazing to sit down and to not comment fight all day, right? I don't do that. Some of you might. To not comment fight all day on social media and spend that time instead writing the book you wanted to write, or spend that time taking the class you always wanted to take. What would it be like to wake up first thing in the morning and meditate for 2 minutes rather than waking up and scrolling and checking your email to see if your boss got to you, right? And I don't know what the particular you that you want to be is, but start to imagine that. What would it be like? What would it feel like? What would it look like? In many cases, it wouldn't look like anything particularly profound, which is a good thing, because if it was profound, that could be difficult. It might just look like you wake up and instead of grabbing your phone, you sit up and you meditate for 2 minutes. It might look like when you're busy doing work, you put your phone on silent and you check your phone every hour so you're not tempted to message your toxic ex back, right? It could look like, it's often very simple. It's just in our head, we've built it up as these giant things because we've never imagined it. We've never sat and actually imagined what the new you, what the you that we want to be would do, what they would feel, what they would believe. So, but guys, I do have to go. It's been a great live. I appreciate all of you. I just want to tell you that. So if you want more information on this challenge, I do send out email summaries every day. And I share the video too. I've been posting these videos on YouTube. It's good seeing you, Kelsey. I appreciate you being here. So on my bio, you can sign up. Hey, welcome, I'm a quoter. Good to see you. Also, too, a little self-promotion here. I just wrote a book. A lot of what I'm doing here is based on that book. It's called The Art of Hypnotic Manifestation. It's just kind of like what I'm talking about here. It's not even particularly spiritual or anything. It's just about using the things I'm talking about here to change your life. It's only on Kindle right now. It is not in print, but I'm working on that. It's on Kindle. I also wrote this book on affirmations. This is in print. Say it like you mean it. How to use affirmations and declarations to create the life you want. Also very similar to the content on here. Both are on Amazon if you're interested. Also sign up for the manifestation emails. I summarize it every day. So it's good seeing all of you guys. And, just the new you is possible. I mean that. Sometimes the new you could literally just be doing one thing differently for 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes. I mean, I got I think I made a TikTok on this. Maybe I haven't released it yet. But even just 5 minutes, like 5 minutes that you may be tempted to spend, like arguing with someone on the internet. Imagine if you spent that 5 minutes instead, like appreciating someone. Or you spent that 5 minutes instead writing the first 3 paragraphs of the new book you want to write. Or writing the song you've always wanted to write. Like even 5 minutes can change your life, because usually 5 minutes leads to 10 minutes, and then leads to 20 minutes, and then leads to an hour. And then eventually you're like, why did I even spend 5 minutes arguing with people on the internet? Why did I even do that, right? So that's how it starts. So guys, have an amazing afternoon, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.